So,
Hello.
good afternoon.
¿Cómo están?
Yes, sir. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's an absolute pleasure. And to open the event, I'm going to briefly introduce our wonderful dean, Shannon Hayter, who will make some opening remarks. So Shannon Hayter is the Dean of the School of International Service, a former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, and Deputy Executive Director of Programs at the Joint United Nations Program on HIV/AIDS, a prominent leader in the fight against HIV/AIDS in the United States and globally. Before accepting the position at the UN, she also served as Director of the Division of Global HIV and TB at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Also served as Vice President and Director at Futures Group International, now Palladium, and a Senior Deputy Director of the HIV/AIDS, Hepatitis, STD, and TB Administration at the DC Department of Health, as well as an advisor at the US Department of State. And I should mention, is also going to be leading an event next Thursday in this very room, so stay tuned. Dean Hayter, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Garret. Thank you for Michelle, and thank you to the Transatlantic Policy Center for co-sponsoring this event, part of our Ambassadors Up Close series. So I'm so glad everyone could make it here today, and for folks that we might have online. We are delighted to welcome Ambassador Cabanas at a time when Spain is currently hosting the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union. Many of its key priorities for the presidency, be it technology and strategic industries, developing renewable energy, promoting fairer, more inclusive economic growth, are naturally in line with the work that many of our faculty here at SIS do. And as we approach the International Education Week in mid-November, I would be remiss if I didn't mention another SIS Spain connection, the long-standing AU Center in Madrid, which has welcomed AU and SIS students for years. I understand almost 30 years, including those drawn by the Program on Global and Public Health Issues. And now to our distinguished guest. His Excellency Santiago Cabanas was recently ambassador to Algeria. Before that, he held top-ranking positions at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Spain, including the Director of the Minister's Cabinet and Director General for Foreign Policy. Ambassador Cabanas has also been the Director General for Consular Affairs and the Director General for Cultural and Scientific Relations. He has also been ambassador to the Czech Republic and to Jordan. He previously served as political counselor at the embassy here in Washington, D.C., and is consul general in Miami. So please help me in welcoming Ambassador Cabanas, and I will pass it back to Garret to begin our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Hayter. Thank you so much. And a particular thank as well to Carl and Antonio of the embassy, because again, these events take work, and it's always a pleasure to be able to work so smoothly and efficiently with the embassies, including Spain. This year, one of the themes of the work of the center is enlargement, because next spring will be the 20th anniversary of a very large round of enlargement that added 10 new states. And I wanted to start my first question around the idea of enlargement, but make it also a personal question. Ambassador, you joined the Foreign Service a few years before Spain joined the EU, so you had a very privileged position of seeing firsthand the way that enlargement changed not only your country, but also your own career. So I'm curious if you could reflect on maybe how enlargement has affected your own professional trajectory.
Thank you very much, and thank you, David. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for being here, and thank you to my colleagues from the embassy who are here. I'm sorry. Yeah, Antonio and Carla, thank you very much to all of you. Well, it's true. I mean, I've been in the Foreign Service already for more than 40 years. And yes, I joined the Foreign Service in '81. That was just 1 year before we joined NATO, and 5 years before we joined the European Union. And so I've been able to see what was being outside the Euro-Atlantic world and being inside. Being part of NATO and especially being part of the European Union has helped transform our country in a tremendous way. If you've traveled around Spain, you've seen that transformation. We're now a very advanced, a very modern, in all senses, technologically, socially, a country that is really wanting to play its part in the formulation of foreign policy of the European Union. We are the third or fourth economy after Brexit in the European Union, and one of the countries that I think is leading the way in which we see the European Union evolving. That helps also because we are not only, and I was mentioning that before, we're not only a European country. Because of our history, we are also an American country, one of the very few countries in the world that can say we are European and American. The Portuguese might say that too, but Spain can say it with good reason, and we feel that we are American. And also we can say that we are an African country because of our geographical position, because we still have part of our country that is in Africa, and because part of our history has been evolving around the Mediterranean, around the north of Africa. You mentioned I was ambassador to Algeria, and I saw the tremendous influence in the northern part of Maghreb, and especially in the western part of Algeria during centuries. So we are a country that can really be a strong part of the European Union because we give a lot to the European Union, but we have received a lot from the European Union, and it has changed completely our country. Structural funds, cohesion funds have been crucial for our country to evolve in what we are now, a very modern country, a very modern economy, a country that is at the forefront in the technological revolution, in the greening of our economy, in the digital transformation of Europe. So the European Union has been crucial, absolutely crucial. Perhaps a little bit less in our careers, although of course it has changed our careers. Before we were not part of the discussions inside the European Union, and suddenly after '86 we were part of the working groups inside the European Union. And I know you had Ambassador Pablo García Verdoy here a few months back teaching about what goes on in the European Union. It's a kind of different diplomacy. The inner workings of the European Union, how decisions are taken. Sometimes it's very difficult to reach decision at 28 then or 27 now, but at the end we reach decisions. At the end we reach consensus. It's not always easy, but we manage to do so. So it transforms the work of our diplomats in the way that we need to be flexible. We need to negotiate in a way that we, at the end, reach agreements, reach consensus. We're seeing it nowadays. For instance, we just had last week a European Council of Heads of States and Government. We arrived there with different positions regarding the situation in Israel, in Gaza. But thanks to the chairmanship, thanks to the presidency of Spain, we reached the conclusions that I think are fair and are good consensus and reflect the common position of the European Union. And that is something that you learn because you're obliged to learn how to negotiate inside the European Union. So the European Union has been politically for my country, socially, economically crucial. And for us diplomats, an extraordinary learning ground of how to negotiate.
That's a great way for me to sort of segue into something that I care about. Oh, no, that's fine. I have a loud voice as well. I'm very interested in trade, and you mentioned sort of Spain and the EU and Spain as a global trade and social cultural bloc. And so to what extent are you still hopeful that the EU-Mercosur trade deal, given the Spanish ties with Latin America, given the EU presidency priority, what are the prospects of it being signed in due course? It's been on the table for 20 years, so I'm hoping that you'll give us some insights.
You're right. We've been negotiating with Mercosur an agreement for many, many years. Truth is, the European Union has 26 trade agreements with the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. And for us, during our presidency, this has been a crucial priority. I think we started in the month of July, our presidency. On the 1st of July, our prime minister was in Kyiv. That showed the first priority, maintaining unity and showing support for Ukraine in the face of this brutal, unjustified aggression by Russia. Our prime minister wanted to show that this was going to be a crucial priority. But immediately afterwards, we hosted the EU CELAC summit. All the heads of states and government of the European Union, together with all the heads of state and government of the Latin American and Caribbean countries. And we had it in July to show that this was a huge priority for Spain. It hadn't met for many years. The last one was in 2018. And so we should have had it before, but Spain wanted to show that for us, the relations between the European Union and Latin America was essential. And by the way, that includes also the United States, the triangular partnership. If we want to face really the challenges that we all know about, we need to work together in a sort of broad transatlantic relationship, which is United States, European Union, and Latin America. It's the only way. I worked as chief of staff for the foreign minister, Josep Piqué, who wrote a book in 2018. And one of the main theses is we're inevitably going into a post-Western world. This is happening. And this is going to happen. We cannot stop. We're going into a post-Western world. But that doesn't mean that we have to forget about what we call Western values, because there are universal values. So we have to work hard to defend these universal values, Western values, if you want to call it, respect for human rights, equality, rule of law, democracy, human rights. We have to work for that. And the only way to do it is reaching out to Latin America and reaching out across the Atlantic. So this is why we've worked very hard with Latin America. And that, of course, includes the trade relationship. We've worked hard to try to finalize the Mercosur agreement, the agreement with Mexico, and the agreement with Chile. It's not an easy job. It's very difficult. There is always some country objecting to that part or the other. I don't want to go and to name names into what's going on there, but it's always complicated. But we're hopeful that during our presidency, we've moved forward, and we're hopeful that finally we will reach an agreement. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly when, but we're quite hopeful that after this semester, after the negotiations that are taking place at the very technical level, technical issues, because I think we've really already surpassed the political part of it. And now it's technicalities. And I'm sure that we will be able to reach, because it's important that we reach that agreement. I'm hopeful.
Oh, good. I work on that, so I'm really happy. I want to pick up just one question, and that's the post-Western world. And I'm going to sort of phrase it that way. So do you think that the US and Europe, thinking of your triangle, that the US and Europe can do more to try and sway Latin American states to condemn Russia, given given obviously the Russian aggression and the war on Ukraine? So if it is a triangle, how can the US and Europe, and especially Spain being at the pivot of that, sort of persuade or do more for Latin America? I mean, there's been a lot of notions that this is a European war.
We'll try to explain that this is not a European war. This is a war in Europe, but it's not a European war. It's much more than a European war. That is a global world on democracy by authoritarian state that wants to break the rules of international law and the rules that we've been living by since the end of the Second World War. And so if they succeed, if aggression succeeds, we all lose. And these messages we're passing to the rest of the world. If you want, the West has to work with the rest. But truth is, we have to be humble too. We have to understand their position, and we have to understand why they have some reticences and why they have some doubts in not only in Latin America, in other parts of the world. We have to do a greater job of explanation. And by the way, also, we have to work hard to avoid disinformation, because Russia is very adept at disinformation. And so we need to work hard avoiding disinformation being. And by the way, during our presidency, we're organizing an event together with Georgetown University on disinformation in Spanish, which is precisely directed to disinformation by Russia and other actors in Spanish language. And we will be working with the State Department and with EFE, which is the Spanish news agencies, and by journalists from Latin America and from the United States, to try to explain how we can avoid disinformation, how we can fight this terrible pandemic of disinformation that we're seeing in the world. So I think we're reaching out, and we have to insist, working together, explaining things with a bit of humility too.
So, part of the mission of the center when we created a few years ago was to pick subjects that had salience on both sides of the Atlantic. And of course, one of those is migration. I mean, we remember that in 2015, the migration crisis really captured the attention of European policymakers. And of course, it's a subject that has a lot of, let's say, emotional and political traction here as well. Currently, the EU is trying to come up with a new pact on migration and asylum. And so the question is really, how confident are you that this pact can really make a difference in terms of having a more common position within the EU, and secondly, also having some domestic support and not leading to political parties in Europe really trying to weaponize immigration as a way to gain support?
Well, obviously, it's on. I think it's on. Obviously, it's a sensitive issue and a complicated, very complicated issue here in the United States and Europe. Everywhere we have different opinions. So we've been working for years already on this pact on migration and asylum and migration. We've tried to push it as much as we could during our presidency, because obviously it's a very important issue for Spain. We are at the border, and we receive quite a lot of migrants. Most of them come legally because we've provided with legal pathways. We had a crisis in 2006, 2007. So we learned a lot from that crisis when many boats came to Spain in what we call the Mariupol crisis. And we learned many lessons. We learned that we had to work together with the countries of origin. We learned that we had to offer them means to develop their countries. And we learned that there was an instrument that was quite useful, which is circular migration, which means that offering legal paths for people to come in, work in our country, in case Spain, and then go back to their countries with the savings that they had made and that would permit to develop their countries. So providing legal pathways was a very good way of controlling illegal migration. And also taking advantage of what we need, because we need migrant workers in our country, like you need in yours, like we need in the whole of Europe. We need them. And of course, Spain is a country like yours of migrants. You just have to look at the map. We're all mixed people. We have people from Europe, from Africa, from the Middle East, from Latin America, and they usually adapt quite well. So we've worked hard on the pact. We haven't reached yet a solution, but we have an objective, which is before the end of the legislature, the European legislature, before the end of April 2024. With the advances that we have made during these last months, we believe that we will be able to approve. The pact has really, let's say, 5 points, if you want, is how to control illegal migration before people arrive at the borders, working with the countries of origin. It has also the part of controlling with a data system people that arrive legally and illegally. It has a part that is actually managing migration in a sensible, fair way, respecting human rights. It has also a part which is a solidarity clause, in which we agree that countries that suffer illegal migration or waves of migrants can be helped by other countries that are not so affected. And it has finally a clause regarding situation in crisis, a situation in which we have a sudden wave of migrants, where we have to respond to a very serious crisis. So I think on these 5 elements, we have made advances, and we're quite confident, I think, really, that before the end of this legislature, European legislature, around April, this is the aim, we will have the pact.
You know, it's thank you for mentioning also that, yes, there are other elections than the American elections in 2024. There will be the European Parliament elections before that, and we do have a new global elections tracker at SIS. So again, plenty of other important votes to keep track of. I wanted to, of course, you know, the events in Gaza and Israel have been at the forefront of many people's concerns and have led to very, you know, strong, difficult debates, understandably. And you mentioned, yes, that there was, after, you know, difficult debates and different positions within the EU, you did come to a common position. But I'm sort of, the question I wanted to ask is, where do you see the European role and the transatlantic role in not only helping to alleviate the fighting, but also, you know, end up with some sort of solution that not only, of course, protects Israel's right to respond, but also that deals with sort of the humanitarian concerns across many parts of the world, and also very much the domestic debates that you see, whether in the US or within European societies as well?
Well, you mentioned the 2 main elements of the position of the European Union, which is the right of Israel to defend itself within international law and within respecting international humanitarian law. That is very clear in the conclusions of the Council, very clear, and a strong condemnation. I think it says in the strongest possible terms of Hamas and the terrible attacks and terrible terrorist attacks. This is quite clear. The second element is, apart from the right of Israel to defend itself, as I said, within international law, the second element is our concern with the deteriorating humanitarian situation and the need for humanitarian pauses and humanitarian corridors so that aid can arrive in Gaza and we avoid a humanitarian disaster. But I think where we can also add an element, which is in the conclusions of the Council, and that's been defended strongly by the Spanish presidency, and I think we managed to reach a conclusion that it was important, is showing a light at the end of the tunnel, going beyond the horror of today and the horrors we're seeing today. And that is why we are again calling for taking into account that at the end, we need to have a solution to this problem. Perhaps after in this horror, we can see a light and we can see the opportunity, like in so many occasions in the European Union, after a crisis, we see an opportunity to advance. And that is why in the conclusions, there is a mention for an international conference and the 2-state solution. We want to show that in spite of the horrors we're seeing, in spite of the terrible things that are happening now, in spite of the terrible terror attacks by Hamas and the tremendous images that we're seeing in Hamas, there should be some hope. There should be a light, even if it is very small now, at the end of the tunnel. And we're calling for an international conference that would have, at the end, the 2-state solution as the great objective. This is a contribution that I think the European Union must do. We're closer to the area. We're affected by migration from the area. We have many people of different European nationalities there, both in Israel. We have a very strong Spanish Jewish community, but we also have many Spanish Arabs living in Spain, and we have many Spanish citizens living in Gaza. So we hope that at the end we take advantage of this terrible thing. And we managed to get this international conference moving forward with the aim of a two-state solution and a permanent solution for something that has been going on for too many years, for too long.
And Madrid has a history of the 1991 peace conference.
Absolutely.
That's true. It almost seems that there's probably going to be more questions from the audience soon on many of these issues, and we want to give time to that. Do you want to ask the last question about linking Ukraine and Middle East? I'll ask the last question. So I would have asked on AI, but I think the foreign policy is so prominent. President Biden made the connection between Ukraine and the Middle East theater. Is this a desirable connection to make? That, recently in his talks and his speech.
I think it is perfectly understandable in the way he did it, and there are connections. Of course, they're very different situations, but there are connections, obviously, and one of them is to see that we're living in a world that is challenging the rules that we've been living for many years, and we should be aware of that. We should be aware that democracy is challenged, democratic values are challenged, and we need to work to reform the international order, reform the international system, reform multilateralism, so that there is solutions at the multilateral level. At this point, the reality is that the United Nations is unable to act. The Security Council is unable to act in both crises. And it's a pity, it's a shame, because the United Nations and the multilateral system should be there precisely for that, to avoid this crisis, and once this crisis happen, to solve them. And we're seeing this lack of ability of the multilateral system to address the urgent cases of the day. So yes, there are connections, and I think President Biden has been very clear about it. And by the way, I have to say that on this issue, both Ukraine and the situation in the Middle East, both European Union and the United States have been very much on the same wavelength, on the same path. Regarding Ukraine, from the very beginning, the United States and the European Union have worked together. Our support, which is not well known, has been very similar to the support of the United States, both in numbers, both in the amount of money that we have been spending, about 85 billion in the European Union, similar numbers here. And this is not well known. I've been asked many times, what are you Europeans doing? This is a European war. I always say the same. It's not a European war, it's a war in Europe, but we're doing a lot. We're doing a lot in all senses. In Ukraine, and take advantage of this opportunity to say a country like Spain that is further south, that has not borders with Ukraine, that is really far away. We've never had a strong relationship with Ukraine, but we have now about 185,000 refugees in our country. And they have immediately been accepted into our education system, into our health system. We're one of the countries that has more minors in our education system. We have about 30 or 40 young Ukrainian kids studying in our public schools. And we've done a tremendous effort financially, and also sending weapons, sending tanks, sending Hawk missiles, sending anti-air systems. So we're doing what we can together with the rest of the European Union, very much in line with the position of the United States. We're working together. I think it's very clear that NATO is a very important alliance. Again, it has shown its utility. And regarding the situation in the Middle East, if you look at what the United States is saying and what the European Union is saying right away now, these elements that I have mentioned, they're very similar to what the United States is saying now.
So now this is a time when we have a challenge. We have a microphone. We have an opportunity to come up, to be polite, to introduce yourselves, and to ask. And remember, ask a question. So there should be a question mark at the end of your statement. And again, this is your venue. So please, I invite you to come up and, ask questions. Don't be shy. Some of you are in my class, so I know you. I will call people by name if it gets to that point.
I don't do that. Also, those on Zoom, if there is a question, we would love to hear from you. We are monitoring the chat.
All right, sir. Lead by example.
Buenas tardes. Encantado de verlo. My name is Roger Rolando Reyes. I'm an intercultural and international communication major here at the SIS in my first year. My question lies in the realm of hybrid warfare and disinformation. In 2 years' time, I'll be a public diplomacy foreign service officer here with the Department of State. So thank you. But my question is, in terms of the European Union and in terms of seeing how warfare is rapidly changing, what does Spain in particular do when it comes to handling the technological side of war, particularly looking at disinformation, propaganda, and AI in particular?
Well, of course, these are very difficult questions, but we are there. We're working hard with the European partners, and we're working hard with the American government, with the US government. Precisely now, we just had an initiative led by the United States. We had a delegation day before yesterday and yesterday on counter-ransomware initiative. We have a good cooperation on cybersecurity. And as I mentioned, this is one of the priorities of our presidency, is the fight against disinformation, precisely in Spanish, because I think we have a role to play there. And that is why we have this event. I think it's on the 9th, isn't it? On the 9th, and you're all invited if you want to go there. It will be at Georgetown University. And so we're taking a leadership role in disinformation in Spanish, because we feel that this is our responsibility, and this is a crucial issue, both in Latin America and in Spain. So I don't want to pretend that we are really the leaders on this issue, but we are involved in all initiatives that are going on in the world regarding this fight against cybersecurity, to promote cybersecurity, against ransomware, and against disinformation.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samin, and I'm a GGPS student at SIS. So thank you all. Thank you, Your Excellency and professors, for giving us your time today. It was great to hear from each one of you. So I had a very specific question about something you said, Your Excellency. You mentioned that Spain has discouraged illegal migration by promoting more legal methods of migration. So could you please tell us a little more about that? Could you give us some examples?
Very good. Yeah. One of the main examples is the one I mentioned, circular migration. We're working with the United States and Canada on promoting circular migration with Central American countries. And we have reached an agreement this year precisely on that issue, on how we can take advantage of our experience. We understand that our experience is perhaps a little bit easier than the situation here in the United States because of the distance. But I will give you an example. An example that is working very well is, for instance, having workers from Morocco and from Mauritania come to pick up strawberries, for instance. This is a 3-month, 4-month. We need people to pick up strawberries, and especially in the south. So we work with the companies to bring foreign workers to come and pick the strawberries or other products. But strawberries is one that has been very successful for many years. They stay there. They have lodging, they get paid, they get all the advantages of working with a good salary, working hard, but with a good salary. And then they go back to their countries. They go back with their savings, and they are able to invest in their countries, and they're able to promote sustainable development in their countries. So they come and they go if they want. Some of them stay, but we provide also the possibility of staying because we need them. We need them. The thing is to avoid the organized groups that bring illegal migrants in our countries. And for that, you cannot, as we say in Spanish, put doors in the fields. There's no way to do that. So we better provide legal pathways for migrants. And this is working relatively well in our country in a way that is positive for everyone. There are other ways, but these circular migration programs are quite positive.
All right, yeah, that really answers my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes, encantada. My name is Martina. I am an international studies major and I'm from Italy. I'm an international student. My question is about the fact that 2 days ago, the 31st of October, La Princesa Leonor de Asturias, she swore loyalty to the Constitution. And with the elections in Spain and the negotiations of the various parties, the PSOE and the PP, some people are saying that she would not be able to reign ever. And I was wondering, what role is the European Union playing in this? And could the US play a role in it, since we're indeed talking about democracy, which is one of the founding principles of the United States?
Well, I think the great majority of the Spanish people is very proud of our crown princess. We saw the 31st of October swearing in ceremony as a day of hope, as a day of really happiness. We are seeing a young generation taking over. We're seeing an extraordinary princess, very well educated, and we're very, very hopeful that she will continue her education and that she will be a great queen one day. And I think I can speak for a great majority of Spaniards. Of course, there is always people that don't like the monarchy, but I think a great majority of the Spanish people are very proud of our monarchy as a factor of unity, as a historical factor of unity in our country. And we're very proud of our king and our princess. And we saw that the other day. I think, well, we have here Antonio and Carla, but I think we were moved. We were moved to see this very young and bright princess, which represents our history, but our future.
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, if I can just mention the floodgates have opened, or maybe the doors in the fields have been opened. So just look behind. There are a number of people behind you. So just keep the questions really concise. Thank you.
I'll try to keep the answers also.
My name's Teddy, and I'm curious, you're so optimistic about the EU, but objectively, there are just these great areas of dysfunction, 20 years negotiating trade, contradictory signals on Gaza, huge crisis in migration, labor shortage. I'm wondering, do you think in this context that there should be some reforms like the direct election of the legislators or ending the EU presidency to prevent from going to smaller countries that can't handle it? Do you think in that context, these reforms might be in order?
Well, it's the European Union is a work in progress. Just think 50 years ago or 70 years ago in Europe, or even a little bit before, when we were fighting. The European Union has been a great success story, a complicated one, of course, a very complicated one, because we're different countries and different sensitivities, and it's not always easy to reach conclusions. But I'm very optimistic, not only optimistic, very optimistic on the European project. I think we're advancing. I think we will manage to enlarge the European Union, and I think we will manage to go further in this process of unity in the European Union. It's needed. And I think most of the European citizens believe in that. So in spite of the ups and downs, in spite of the difficulties, I think we will continue with the reforms. Of course, the European Union has to continue with the reforms. It has done so over the years, continuously, and we will continue to reform the European Union. But as a Spaniard who's greatly benefited from being part of the European Union, I can only say, let's keep working on the European Union. It's a wonderful project.
Thank you. Very briefly, what's the Spanish position on possibly dangerous Chinese overinvestment into the European Union?
Well, of course, we have to be careful. With China, I think we have, at this point, similar positions with the United States. I think we need to cooperate in certain issues. It's obvious that we cannot face climate change, for instance, without cooperation with China. So there is this pillar of cooperation. There is another pillar which is competition. And there what we ask is for a fair competition, for rules that can be respected by China and by the rest of us. And then there is a third pillar that we have to admit is confrontation. We have different systems. And we have to be aware of that and not be, to be innocent about that, about what China is. China is a different system, and they promote an authoritarian model, which is contrary to our interests and is contrary to our own democratic system. So we have to be aware of these three main pillars of our relations with China. And in that, answering your question, it's in the area of competition. And so we need to be fully aware that we need a level playing field with China. Otherwise, we will lose. And I think we're working on that together with the United States to ensure that we keep cooperating with them wherever we can, and that we ensure a level playing field, and that we're not, innocent about the need to confront China where it needs to be confronted. They are promoting a system that is contrary to our values.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I have to put David to shame here a little bit. David is our student representative of one of our new undergraduate houses, I believe the House of Hawks and Doves, for students focused on foreign policy, and they do a lot of events such as showing an episode of The Diplomat. I don't know if you've seen the series, but it seems quite glamorous to be a diplomat, at least according to that. So David, sorry.
Well, thank you. I'd like to go up the China question too. The 2022 NATO strategic concept really elevates China to a security problem that the US and Europe need to work together on, especially it mentions coercion that the Chinese are doing. What are some ways that either Spain or the European Union would like to see the United States kind of collaborate and operationalize that strategic concept?
I think we're cooperating well with the United States and with other countries regarding the challenges, the systemic challenges posed by China. I think we're quite pleased with the cooperation with the United States, both at the level of trade and economic relations at the TTC, which is a wonderful instrument of cooperation between the United States and Europe, and at the more political level. We had then just a few days ago the EU-US summit with President Michel and von der Leyen here, meeting with President Biden and with the whole team. And we had occasion to talk about all these issues. I think there are many ways in which we can cooperate, and we're doing so, I think, rather effectively. Again, with China, we have many ways in which we have to cooperate, many ways in which we have to compete, and we have to be aware that they're promoting a different system. And we should promote our system because we believe in it, and we think, again, that this is the way that defines us, defines our identity, and we should defend it.
Thank you.
If I can ask a small favor of the next two gentlemen, if you can ask your questions consecutively, and then just to make sure that everybody gets a chance to ask, that's okay.
Your Excellency, thank you for visiting. You briefly mentioned the EU enlargement, and I'm glad that you did. Considering the rising tensions in the Western Balkans and the Berlin summit that just happened recently, and the Spanish presidency of the Council, how do you look at the enlargement of the Western or the EU into the Western Balkans, and what will be the priorities that you will address during your presidency?
Buenas tardes, Excellencia. Given the present major concerns, including Russia's extreme invasion of the Ukraine, what is Spain currently getting out of NATO when it is providing weaponry to the Ukraine? It will not be defended if Morocco attacks it in Ceuta and Melilla, its point of contention. Then there is Gibraltar, which is occupied by a NATO member, coming from the Foreign Ministry's webpage. In reference to not being defended, I'm referring to Dr. D. Alfonso Fernandez Alvaro of Alicante's 2022 paper on U.S. involvement in the Spanish Sahara crisis. And then, so to end that off, why is Spain supporting that if there's these contentions with some other allies in regards to regional issues and crises?
I don't know if I got the question.
Oh, sorry.
I got the word Gibraltar.
Yeah.
But I understand, what about tensions with other allies?
Yeah.
With allies.
Yeah.
With allies.
Allied tension and then enlargement and then not dropping the ball on the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's an important question, of course. Spain is very much in favor of enlargement, very much so, and we will continue to do so. We also hope that we will do some words of encouragement to Ukraine for a future, because we believe Ukraine belongs at the end inside the European Union. And we're very much in favor of enlargement, and we believe that at the same time, we'll need to have some reforms. The enlarged European Union will need some reforms too, so we'll be working on that. But rest assured, for us, enlargement is a very important part of the European project. And regarding tensions with allies, there are always tensions with allies, there are always problems, but we solve them peacefully, and we solve them by dialogue, and we solve them by negotiations. Regarding Gibraltar, it's been going on for a long time, and we have a permanent discussion with the British. We have agreements after Brexit regarding the use of because it's in our interest, in our common interest, development of the area around Gibraltar. So we're negotiating with them. It's an issue that is a bit painful for Spain, of course, because it's the last colonial area in Europe, and I think it's completely outdated. It doesn't make much sense. But we hope that we will find a solution, a peaceful solution with the British. There are our allies in NATO. They're not anymore in the European Union, which is a pity, but it has created also the challenge and the opportunity to reach some agreements because, of course, Gibraltar is now out of the European Union. So we hope that we will find a solution as we find solutions with the other tensions that might arise with allies, whether it is commercial, generally they're commercial, these tensions. But peacefully and through dialogue, we managed to solve them.
But Ambassador, you had the last laugh on the football field recently during the Women's World Cup anyway. Please, so again, there's two questions in a row, if that's okay.
Muchísimas gracias, Excelencia. I grew up in Madrid and now study here in DC. And I know the embassy is involved with, of course, the consulates, as well as with associations such as the Consejo de Residentes Españoles.
Yeah.
And so we've talked a bit about migration, and I was wondering what you believe the role of diaspora, expats, and fellow Spaniards living abroad, like ourselves. What is the role, our role, and do you believe that we can benefit the positive establishment of diplomatic relations?
And in a similar note, you've spoken a lot about the partnership between the United States and improving relations in Latin America. I was wondering if you could speak to the recent United Nations vote condemning the embargo on Cuba, the United States embargo on Cuba, and how you view U.S. economic warfare, and if there's a need to shift to a more responsible foreign policy in the region.
Well, regarding the diaspora, and of course, it's very important for all of us. We have about 200,000 Spaniards living in the United States, and we believe they're all ambassadors of Spain here, and they can help us a lot. We have, as you mentioned, the Consejo de Residentes. We have many different instruments around. We have 8 consulate generals and a consulate here in Washington, D.C. And I think advantage, I don't know if we have 2 minutes, but I take advantage of this situation to talk a little bit about our common history, about the shared history of the United States and Spain, which is a story that is not well known. Our common history is completely ignored here in the United States and probably also in Spain. Jefferson wrote that the first pages of the history of this nation were written in Spanish, and in fact they were. That is a reality. The Spaniards were here at the beginning of the 16th century, and the first schools, the first hospitals, the first town halls, the first churches were in Spanish. The first civil registries in cities like Pensacola and like St. Augustine, like and in so many other places, San Antonio, Santa Fe, and of course the missions in California. And this is not a part of our history that is well known, as it is not well known that Spain was crucial in the support of the American Revolution. And I would say more than Spain, the Hispanics, because the people that fought here alongside the Continental Army with Washington came from Spain, but they also came from Mexico and from Cuba and from Central America. They were all Spaniards at the time, but they came from the Americas and they fought for the independence of this nation. And this is a story that is not well known. Many, many people shed their blood for the independence of the United States coming from Central and South America and from Cuba and from Spain itself. I had the honor of the opportunity. For the first time in history, I was invited to Yorktown to the celebration on the 21st of October of the victory of Yorktown that ended the war. And for the first time, Spain was honored because of our contribution to the Battle of Yorktown. And indeed, it was crucial because we, from Havana, came different ships with almost 1 million reales de ocho, which was the currency, the world currency at the time. It was like the dollar today. And this money, huge amount of money, had been coming from Spain, from Cuba, from Mexico, and it helped enormously win the war. And of course, we had about 11,000 troops, many of them coming from the Americas, that were fighting the British in the South. And this is not well known. And it's not well known for two reasons. The first one is that the new nation, the United States of America, they looked west and south. And what did they see? A huge territory under the Spanish crown. And it was logically the territory of the new nation. So we were the next enemy. So we couldn't be depicted as the ally because we were the next enemy. So there was already there, put forward by others, this black legend. So, it was an easy way of depicting the Spaniards as the bad guys because we were the next enemy. And Spain was not interested either in letting it be known that we had been crucial ally in the War of Independence. Because why? Because we were helping the northern colonies gain their independence while we were not allowing our southern colonies become independent. It was completely, it was non-coherent. It was contradictory. So we just shut down, and we didn't say anything about that contradiction. So, but now things have moved forward. This 250 years have passed, and so this is why we're making an effort to letting it be known that the first pages of the history of this nation were written in Spanish, that we have a common history, and this common history is not only Spain; it's a Hispanic history. The Hispanics have been here since the beginning of the 17th century. And I'm always very proud when I go into New Mexico and Arizona, and people tell me, my family has been here since 1648 or since 1589. I mean, it's amazing and it's moving because it's true. It's a reality that we should be aware and proud of. So this is very important. We count on you. We count on this huge percentage of Hispanic population, 50 million, 18% of the American population, that are very different, very diverse, but they share a common language and they share a shared history, a common legacy here in the United States of America. I'm very proud of that. And the second question, are you happy with
The lesson in diplomacy.
Well, I don't know, you had different questions here. You had different questions. I don't know which one you want me to answer more, but
just given how important Spain is to the economy of Cuba and given its impending crisis, I was just wondering if Spain and the EU are in any position to kind of ease the tension, relax.
We've been trying to do that for many, many years. Cuba, for us, it's an internal issue. It's a domestic issue. The relation with Cuba, it's a very fraternal. That is why we've always been clear that we support the Cuban population. And of course, we want for the Cubans the best. We want for Cuba what we want for us, and that is democracy, respect of human rights, sustainable development. We want the very best for them, and that is why we push for democracy in Cuba. We might diverge with the United States in the way of achieving it. Because of that, because of our fraternal history, we all have families in Cuba, and the Cubans have all families in Spain. It's been going on it was a jewel of the Caribbean. It was a jewel of Spain. And not only because of that, but also because of our own experience. We believe that the way for change in Cuba is promoting the agents of change, is a peaceful way of reaching democracy by promoting the agents of change, by promoting openness, by helping all of those that in different ways, economically, politically, socially, culturally, open spaces of freedom in Cuba. This is the way we try to encourage democracy in Cuba. So that is why we're not in favor of embargoes, and that is why we're not in favor of, let's say, limiting the ability of the Cubans to travel, limiting the ability of the Cubans to have access to internet or have access to all kinds of cultural goods that might promote these agents of change. For us, Cuba is something very dear, something very close. And that is why we agree with the United States in the objectives. We might have differences in how to achieve them.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to have to be 3 very quick points because time is going to be of the essence. Number one, thank you for coming. Keep coming to events, even if you're tired. An engaged community is a thriving community. And 3 events on November 7th, Bulgarian and Romanian ambassadors, our colleagues will be here. November 9th, a conversation with the Dean. And November 16th, it's not yet fully official, but we have the Ukrainian former defense minister, who is going to be Alexei Reznikov. November 16th, save the date. Secondly, again, an incredible thanks to the Spanish embassy and to the Ambassador Cabanas for coming tonight. Really delighted. And thirdly, I apologize, but the ambassador has to rush to the APEP summit. So please allow him to make a quick exit. Yeah, scheduling matters. Thank you so much to all of you for being here tonight.